Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded, so anything said verbally, anything viewed via webcam, or anything typed in the chat can possibly become part of the recording that is posted publicly. Please mute your phone when not speaking. I'll be displaying materials to the group. And then if you're on phone only, sometimes you have to hit *6 on your phone pad to unmute yourself. All right, thanks for your patience. Dr. Rice?
Morning. We'll call the meeting to order. I can just ask folks to unmute. We're doing a lot of background noise, probably from the telephones. On the phone, maybe mute your phone.
Chester Key on the phone.
All right. Okay. I'll go ahead and do roll call. Amber Rice?
Here.
Okay. Brian Smith?
Present.
Chester Key, I just heard you. Ed Mazulis said he was not going to attend. Josh Gaither?
Present.
Chris Ramos? Chris Long?
Present.
Matt Shaw?
Present.
Orlando Alcordo?
Present.
Ryan Harold? Sandy Nygaard?
Present.
Sharon Hollingsworth?
Present.
Stevie Merrill? I count 9. We have quorum. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelley. So we'll move on to the chairman's report here. So for the first item is the attendance report. So if you look at this attachment 3A, just as a reminder, if you missed 2 consecutive meetings, we'll contact you and ask if you want to still be on the committee. Right now, we don't have any new members or vacancies to announce. And then after that, I will move on to the Bureau report. So thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, Chair Dr. Rice and committee members. This is Rachel Garcia with the Bureau of EMS and Trauma System. I want to start out by saying that we look forward to some of the discussion later in the agenda today related to the status of the emergency declaration here in the state of Arizona. We continue to monitor COVID-19 metrics, and all of our metrics are really trending in that right direction, and the pandemic here really looks to be winding down. You know, as we have navigated the pandemic, we have had several collaborative work groups coming together to help address some of the challenges that have been identified here, especially in the last couple months. There has been an EMS and hospital collaborative work group that has come together to really discuss ambulance offload times and interfacility pre-scheduling. And that work group currently is made up of hospital CMOs, EMS agencies, as well as Maricopa County Department of Public Health. Our goal with some of these collaborative work groups coming together is to bring some of the information that and recommendations that they provide forward to the regional councils and statutory and standing committees for further review and recommendations. So please let us know if you have any questions about those collaborative work groups and or some of the plans and pilot projects that are being proposed right now. I'm sure we'll be discussing the ambulance offload plan during our next committee meeting with PMD this afternoon. We continue to, on the legislative side, track a handful of bills that have potential to impact EMS and trauma here in the state of Arizona. Again, please let us know if you have any questions on some of the pending legislation this session. Rulemaking continues here. We are still working with stakeholders on updating air ambulance and ground ambulance rules. The air ambulance rules are making their way through the formal process currently. While the ground ambulance draft rules are still in the informal stage, there should be some upcoming committee meetings with the ground ambulance work group, and we would expect the next draft of ground ambulance rules to be posted to the department's website in the next month or so for public comment. I will quickly plug that we are also planning a trauma program managers and trauma medical directors work group meeting on April 28th, and we will look forward to that event, which will be hosted virtually. And next, I will make our way through our other items related to the Bureau report. I don't know that she is online, but we would like to welcome Antonia Gerard to the Bureau of EMS and Trauma System. She is the new rate analyst working with the CON and rates program within the Bureau. We're very fortunate that she brings her financial and accounting background with her to the Bureau, and we look forward to working with Antonia more and introducing her to stakeholders as she gets up and going with the Bureau. As you all know, it has been very challenging to recruit and onboard folks during this time frame, and the Bureau looks forward to potentially gaining new resources in the future to be able to continue to recruit and onboard the staff that are really necessary to make sure that we're able to carry out our statutory requirements. I'm going to go ahead and pass on to Dr. Bradley next to talk about naloxone leave behind and opioids.
Thank you, Chief Garcia. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar. I've been doing a plug at all of our standing and statutory committee meetings, really trying to put out more information regarding our naloxone leave behind program. On the agenda, there are hyperlinks to our website, which includes all the resources you would need if you would like to implement this program in your jurisdiction. We have the training PowerPoint that was put together for EMS, along with the template educational pamphlet that can be customized to your jurisdiction to make sure that you have resources specific to your area for your patient population, and a link to the ADHS office where you can also order naloxone for your agency to distribute. As some of the data was demonstrated in the last meeting, we still are seeing a significant number of opioid overdoses, and we're also seeing a trend of less patients wanting to be transported to the hospital when they are undergoing an opioid overdose. So we want to make sure that we get this information out there, get patients good resources regarding both naloxone as well as where to get resources for substance use disorder. If you have any questions regarding the program or how to implement the program in your jurisdiction, I will put my name in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you. I will turn it over to Julia Vinton next to discuss SHARE.
Good morning. Just a quick update on SHARE. The Bureau has been working over the last year to recollect information from cardiac receiving and referral centers across the state to ensure that recognized hospitals have continued to maintain recognition requirements. As of today, we've been able to recognize 35 receiving centers and 2 referral centers across the state. So we just wanted to thank everyone that's worked on submitting documents to the Bureau / submitting data to CEDAR. We really value your participation in the program. And then just an encouragement that CEDAR staff at the Arizona Emergency Medicine Research Center are hoping to get out the 2021 SHARE reports a little bit earlier this year. And we know that the hospital outcomes data is crucial, so we just appreciate you trying to get your data in as soon as possible. That's all I have, and I will hand it over to Adam.
Thanks, Julia. Good morning, everyone. Couple of quick updates. The Emsc Survey is moving along nicely. We are ahead of last year's numbers, and we still have some time to go, so we are excited about that. We are in our 5th year of our grant cycle, and we've just received word yesterday that our funding is to be issued over the next few months, so we can continue our efforts. And to meet the goals of the Adverse Childhood Event project, we have developed an interactive training tool for EMS, which can be found on the Bureau's education page, and I will drop my contact in the chat if anybody has anything to follow up for me. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to TJ for the inter-EMT update.
Good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Couple of quick updates. The main one's going to be the National Registry update later in the meeting, but there's a couple items some folks had some interest in. One was some questions circulating about documentation using CPR cards and things like that for their continuing education with National Registry. There was a question about CPR and other items being accepted. The problem derived from cards not including the hours associated with the program, so people can use those for continuing education units. They just might not be able to use the card itself. So if they get the documentation from the program, they should be fine with those. National Registry is going to be updating some of their servers and other software in preparation for the change to their testing procedures. So for a few days in April, they might have some challenges scheduling some tests as they move forward. The NASEMSO meeting last week, one of the items some folks were interested in is the field triage guide that was coming out, out of the cooperative agreements, CAP 2. That's in its final hours, and if it hasn't already been released, it should be released shortly, which will deal with some of the clinical guidelines there with the triage items. I know a few programs had asked about that. The primary change that we're looking at, again, that I'm going to be addressing later, is the sunsetting of psychomotor testing with National Registry. The BLS levels have already taken place, and the ALS levels will be moving that way during the next year. And I'll pass it back.
All right, thank you very much for all of the updates. Let's move on to our discussion and action items. The first discussion and action item is to approve the education draft minutes from November's meeting. So if I can get in a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve. This is Sandy.
Brian, second.
All right, and is there any other discussion? Otherwise, we can take a vote. All right, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
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 And are there any opposed? That motion passes. We can move on to our second agenda item. Our next agenda item is going to be to discuss them and approve some draft training materials for maternal resuscitation. So if I can get a motion to discuss this agenda item.
So moved. Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Second, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. So just for background, this was brought forward by one of our other groups to create a work group to discuss this and create a training. So maternal mortality has continued to climb in the United States, especially relative to other countries. And so we thought we'd bring forward this training to address some maternal mortality issues. So this is a little bit outside of what would normally be in the sort of standard OBGYN NREMT, but kind of discusses some specific obstetrical emergencies. So it starts out talking a little bit about trends in maternal mortality, just looking at the numbers in general. And then just a few stats about timing
Dr.
of
Rice,
maternal.
do you want me to scroll through?
Yeah, you can go ahead and scroll through, Shelley. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm just kind of talking as you're scrolling. So there's something called urgent maternal warning signs. And so these are the serious conditions to watch for during pregnancy and up to 1 year after pregnancy. That seems to be the relevant time period where we have a lot of maternal deaths. So these next few slides really just go over symptoms that may present in that time period that should not be ignored and what conditions they could be a potential warning sign of. So more in line with trying to make sure that we're not missing important diagnoses in the field and helping to encourage those with any of these symptoms to be seen in the emergency department. And some of the conditions referenced, I think, were fairly self-evident. There were a couple, as we'll go down, for abdominal pain, things like that. And so we did go on to just talk a little bit about preeclampsia, eclampsia, and HELP syndrome, since that seemed to be the one thing that the work group had identified, that maybe there wouldn't be as much education in traditional paramedic training programs for. There are a couple slides in here about preeclampsia and HELP syndrome and what it is. And then the work group felt that there would be some utility in providing a little bit of information about resuscitating a sick maternal patient and how that could be different than some other patients and some special considerations. So these slides go through management of crashing pregnant postpartum patient. So some information about following guidelines for generally unstable patients, and then information about what could be some maternal causes of collapse. So sort of like H's and T's sort of for pregnant people. And then some respiratory considerations, so things that you may consider additional in respiratory patients, intubation considerations, oxygenation considerations, just given the differences in demand and physiology over that period, management and cardiac arrest, generally being the same, and then some other cardiovascular considerations related to where to place the IV, not changing medication doses in cardiac arrest, and not withholding any medications in cardiac arrest due to pregnancy. And that was it for the end of the presentation. So any feedback, questions, other discussion?
Amber, this is Gail. I just wanted to say a big thank you to the committee for working in this training PowerPoint. This was brought to us as an idea by one of the other areas within the Department of Health. And it's really where you identify kind of a need for training. And it was really a wonderful idea to bring forward. And I think many EMS personnel recognize that they often need additional training on OB-related emergencies. So a big thank you for this idea to get brought forward and for you guys to putting together this curriculum.
Yeah, thank you. There was a lot of great collaboration, and it was great kind of working across different departments within the DHS to put things together. So. I can take a motion if there isn't any further discussion to accept this training.
This is Sandy. I'll make the motion to accept the training.
Hi, this is Chris Long. I'll second it.
Thank you both. With those two motions, we'll take this to a vote. So all in favor of accepting this training PowerPoint, we'll put this up on the website. Say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? Wonderful. With that, that motion is accepted, and we will move on to our next agenda item. Our next discussion action item is to discuss and approve the formation of, discuss and approve educational draft training resources for pediatric patients, naloxone for pediatric patients. Go ahead and put that one up and get a motion to discuss this one.
So moved. Matt.
Second, Chris Long.
Thank you. And then, I don't know, if Julia's on. Julia, is this something you wanted to talk a little bit about?
I will let Adam go through it.
Thanks, Julia. So this was a product of the PACES work group, Narcan work group. So this is the resultant of those efforts. The audience is meant to be as broad as possible. It's meant to include law enforcement officers to paramedics, and so you'll see some differing dosages according to those different types of people who are administering this. But really, we try to generate it as a catch-all, as general as we can be, because it's a very easy thing to reverse once it's identified, and so that was the motivation for the orientation of the slide.
And this is Gail again. I think this really identified the benefit of having PACES part of the Bureau and kind of making sure that moving forward, when we have any of our educational curriculums, that we really try to have at least one PACES member as a part of that committee. We have had the naloxone education for a number of years within the Bureau, and I think PACES identified that there was maybe one or two total slides that covered pediatric patients. And so really recognizing this is very pediatric specific, but as we create any educational PowerPoints, we want to make sure that we continue that collaboration between the Education Committee and PACES to ensure that we cover our pediatric patient population. So thank you for bringing that forward and working on this.
I scrolled through, but we can ask if there are any amendments needed.
Yeah, is there any further discussion on this training?
This is Dale on the phone. If I can comment and echoing what was said before, I think PACES work group, I think really did a good job here. Anecdotally, I think biggest concern that people out in the community had about dosing was in regards to dosing for peds. So allowing us to put a couple of slides addressing the fact that that this is there's precedence here, and that the benefit outweighs the risk, and giving some data to that, I think really, it adds an encouragement towards utilization of Narcan and peds in the community.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Woolwood. And I am happy also to take a motion to approve this training as long as there's some further discussion.
So moved, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Seconded, Matt.
Matt. All right, all in favor of approving this training, say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? All right, and that motion passes. On to our third discussion and action item. We have to discuss and approve educational draft training. Never mind, next one down. It's so tiny on my computer. This one is to discuss and approve forming a work group to review and create a curriculum for the special training required skills. So in the agenda, the links to the current scope and the list of STRs as well. So if I can get a motion to discuss this action item.
This is Chris Long. I move to discuss.
Thank you, Chris.
This is Sandy. I'll second.
Thank you, Sandy. And Gail, did you want to provide any additional information on this one?
Sure, Amber, I can go ahead and give a little background. Shelley, if you can maybe click on the STR document there, thank you. So this had come up, I think, a couple of years ago now, where we had discussed potentially converting this document to a document that was really more educational PowerPoint related. So the Education Committee over the last several years has created a PowerPoint training curriculum specific to some STRs. And the hope was to really have something that an agency who is going to implement a STR, that their medical director could take that curriculum and either utilize it as it's written by this committee or make any adjustments they felt necessary. The current format that is on here, which Shelley is showing you, is really a kind of more course descriptor. It's not something that would be easy to implement into a training curriculum. With our most recent scope of practice update, we eliminated a large number of STRs within the state of Arizona. And so the number of STRs that would actually need to have training is significantly reduced. So one of the things would be, does this committee want to look at creating a work group to first just evaluate what are the current STRs, how many are there, and how many do we need a curriculum for? Because this current document is out of date as it has the old scope of practice. And then depending on that workload, does the committee want to start looking at developing some STRs for some of those other, curriculum for some of those other STRs? So that's a little bit of background on this document. For those who participate in these committees for a while, I think you'll remember when we went through this 230-page document. This is, I think, probably quite some time ago that these were worked on and developed. So I wanted to bring that a little bit of background to that committee. When we talked about this last, I think the committee felt overwhelmed by the large number of STRs and the number of training curriculum that would be required. If you can maybe just open up the current scope of practice, just at a quick glance, you will see a significant reduction in STRs. So that is some of the background.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. I actually do get emails on a regular basis for STR training from folks looking for these specifically on the DHS website, which I usually point them to first. So I don't know how many other folks are using these, but we tend to use them as well in our agencies for these skills. So is there anyone that'd be interested in making a motion to form a work group?
I'll make a motion to form a work group. This is Sandy, and I would like to participate in that work group.
Thank you, Sandy.
This is Chris Long. I'll second that, and I would also like to participate.
Wonderful. All right, so all in favor of forming a work group to discuss the creation of some draft curriculum or some curriculum to go along with the STR skills listed in our current document here, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, that motion passes. If anyone is interested, email Shelley. You can CC myself as well, and we'll get a meeting put together with those who volunteer with Sandy and Chris and I to work on this next project. And then on to the next item here. So the next agenda item is our standing agenda item that we have to review the table of posted trainings and approve forming a work group to update these trainings as needed as well. So Gail, if you want to talk a little bit about this one too, actually I'll take a motion first to discuss this item. Or do I need a motion for a standing item, Shelley?
No, only if you need to form a work group that's associated with it.
Okay. Well, this is the standing education module list that we've had. We use it to keep track of the review cycle and make sure that things don't get wildly out of date that we have up on the website. So it's a good tool to have. Gail, do you have anything else you want to say about this? Is this something you want to remove as a standing item? Is that the suggestion?
I think we just like to make sure that the committee reviews that. If you can scroll up just a bit, you can see that there are a few that are probably up for review that are a little bit older. Looks like the Life Vest and Stop the Bleed. There may not be any real changes to either of those, but those were last updated in 2018. So we do like to at least get eyes on the curriculum and make sure that there's nothing significant that has changed or any recommendations that are different. So it might be worthwhile if this group is interested, creating a work group to at least just review, see if there's any updates needed to those two.
Wonderful. So I'm happy to to help with the review process, if anyone would like to make a motion to form a work group, this may be something we could do potentially as one work group. The reviews tend to be less time intensive on work groups than creating the documents from scratch. But if we'd like to, we could potentially review these two together if I have a motion to form a work group to review these two.
Brian, so moved.
Thank you, Brian.
Matt, seconded.
Thank you, Matt. So all in favor of moving forward with forming a work group as suggested to review the couple of items that might be out of date, say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? Fantastic. And as with the other work groups, you can email Shelley and myself if you are interested in helping review these documents. You generally, for the reviews, we will review them sort of offline because we don't need to create as much material. And then we can come together as a work group and talk about any suggested revisions.
Amber?
Yes.
Yeah, one last question. Sorry, Sheila, if you can just bring that up again quickly.
Uh-huh.
One of the things, looking at some of these, we have it currently, I believe, on a 2-year cycle for review. One of the things I don't know if the group is interested in potentially going to a 3-year cycle for the standard review and update, unless there's something significant that someone is aware of that comes out. Many of these, there won't be significant changes on a 2-year time frame, so it might be worthwhile extending that to 3 years just as a discussion point for the group to consider as well. For
Yeah,
the next meeting, Shelley. Yeah. Just think about it for July.
Yeah, I think it's for sure. All right. Let's move on to our next action item here, which is to discuss impacts of the NREMT, ALS redesign and distributive education limits. Can I get a motion to approve or to discuss this action item?
Dr. Rice, sorry, just going back to the last part, is there room to talk about any of the ones that are listed for the future, or do we want to hold off on that right now?
Sure.
I was mostly wondering
Was
about
there one that
the
you
death
had in mind?
notification training. The death notification training.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Is
has
this
to be
something that you wanted?
a separate.
I'm not sure. Should we something put on a future agenda, Shelley?
For the July agenda.
Perfect.
Sorry, my computer was making.
I have a follow-up question, Dr. Rice. Are there any volunteers for that work group that was just formed to review both the 2020 things?
I didn't have any volunteers yet.
Okay.
Sure. Shelley.
All right, I have one. His name is Matt. Thank you, Matt.
And Matt, we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting if you'd like. The
That'd
death
be great. Thank you.
notification. Thank you. Okay, if I can get a motion to discuss item F, NREMT ALS redesign.
Brian, so moved.
Sandy, a second.
Thank you, Sandy. TJ, do you want to give a little bit of information on this one?
Sure. I'll actually start with the second one first, since it's the simpler topic. The distributive education limits for National Registry are currently unlimited. They are not going to change at least until the June meeting, and probably not for this recertification cycle. So people can take advantage of those opportunities. The National Registry ALS redesign is a little bit more complicated, and I apologize for those of you that are really familiar with this. I'll try and get through some of it as quickly as I can, but the changes with the psychomotor testing process was born basically out of the board of directors meeting in 2019 to improve and refine their examinations for certification and a new focus towards clinical judgment as opposed to repetitive items and memorizing sheets. COVID basically provided the opportunity to move forward with these items in the EMT students and those attempting to obtain National Registry certification. The ALS redesign is currently underway. It's got 4 major components. The first one is replacing a portfolio requirement with an eligibility requirement, which essentially puts more responsibility on the training programs to attest to student competency. Third one is
TJ, sorry to interrupt. Your audio is coming in and out.
Motor exam. I'm sorry. Is that any better?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
Can you go back to the beginning, Eugene?
Go back to the beginning.
Can you go back to the beginning? Yes, because we only got the first one. We missed everything else.
The first component or all the way back?
We got the very first.
No, when you said 4 replacements.
Yeah.
Okay, so the components is replacing portfolio. Basically, it's putting more responsibility on the training programs to attest to student competency. The next one was strengthening and expanding the cognitive exam that currently exists. The third is sunsetting the psychomotor exam and a focus on soft skills. The fourth one is communication and community involvement. And specifically, that is encouraging involvement and collaboration with the EMS field. And that is done through their expert panel that they've already assembled. There's a group of milestones associated with this project. Right now, we're currently still on the first one, but they're working on a number of them simultaneously. So I know we're at least up through milestone 4, which is addressing some of the legislative actions that need to be taken and legislative updates that might need to be passed through specific states. We had a meeting and a survey on that at the end of February. The expert panel was assembled last year. They began meeting in July of 2021 with topics like the initial concepts, the domain level scoring, peer profession identification, retest procedures, and this focus on clinical judgment. And the clinical judgment has been kind of born out of the paper they created through a number of the authors with Registry, the framework for clinical judgment in EMS. And that was presented a couple of weeks ago to the expert panel where they explained the justification for a number of items and kind of a return to a dependency on local control for making sure that the students that are applying for national certification have been validated and vetted by the training programs versus going through and demonstrating proficiency on practical skills. So what we've got in Arizona is a requirement to still have a comprehensive practical skills test. And that is specifically defined as something that evaluates the student's technical proficiency and skills consistent with the national education standards for the applicable EMT level. So it's our 925-304 subsection that gives us the ability to continue at least evaluating this, or actually the responsibility to continue evaluating this despite the actions of National Registry. But obviously, there's going to be a national approach to refining this system overall. And that the paper that they've got that is providing a lot of the background and driving force for this is available publicly if anyone wants to download that. And I can forward out a link to that if needed as well. And anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything.
Thank you, TJ. If you have time before the end of the meeting, would you mind dropping the link in the chat for the document for those that are interested? Would that be possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
TJ, I do have a question. It's Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando.
Do you want us to continue using National Registry documents, or is that okay with you?
Yeah, I mean, you can use a version of your own that essentially hits the key points for that. And I think as we move forward with this, it would be logical for stakeholders in the state to develop what we are going to define as that practical skills test that's comprehensive. There's a lot of suggestion towards moving towards a scenario-based one with skills incorporated into that. And I think as we move forward in this process, getting together with all the training programs in the state to find something that makes sense for everyone is the logical step forward. But until we get to that point, nothing has changed as far as the state goes.
You got it. Thank you. So this might be a future agenda, Dr. Rice. The task force to join TJ, and we can get all the programs to look at a skill sheet or a checkoff that is used throughout, instead of folks making their own.
Yeah, thank you, Orlando. And I had one more question for you today. Just to clarify, the waiver on limited distributive education, those end for those recertifying this month. Are you saying those are going to be extended again? Or
yeah, the recertification, they have extended them at least until their June meeting. But the information that I've heard that's unofficial is they are probably not going to change through 2022.
Okay, so there will probably be the limits to the distributive again for the next research cycle.
There are no limits through the meeting in 2022,
okay.
And they don't have any official plans to move forward with reinstating limits through
Okay.
2022 yet, but that's an unofficial perspective.
Interesting. Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll hear much more from TJ on that in the future. Does anyone have any other questions for TJ related to this discussion item? All right. With that, we can move on to the next discussion item. If I can get a motion to discuss the status of the emergency declaration.
This is Chris Long. I move to discuss.
Thank you, Chris.
Brian, second.
Thank you, Brian. All right. Chief Garcia, is this something you wanted to discuss?
Thank you, Dr. Rice. We wanted to make sure that we are covering this topic of the status of the emergency declaration in all of the committee meetings today. So this will be a bit of a repeat of what we just covered this morning. But we know that here in the state of Arizona, the emergency declaration end is near. It might be a matter of weeks, but more likely we're talking a matter of days as ADHS continues to monitor all COVID metrics, and especially COVID-like illness continues to drop. So as we consider the emergency declaration potentially ending in the very, very near future, we want to make sure we are talking about the impacts of some of the emergency measures and waivers that have been in effect over the last 2 years, so that stakeholders can begin to start preparing and planning for what the end of the emergency declaration means here in Arizona. So some of the things that have been in play over the last couple years that would be sunsetting in the very near future would include the enhanced surveillance advisory. That is an executive order that mandates reporting by hospitals, reporting by lab partners, and other stakeholders. One of the items in the Enhanced Surveillance Advisory is that PSAPs can receive information on COVID cases. When that Enhanced Surveillance Advisory sunsets, that mandatory reporting will end. We expect that the shift from the mandatory reporting will be over to encouraging voluntary reporting to continue by some entities. Particularly hospital and vaccination providers can continue to use the state of Arizona as a pass-through to federal reporting requirements. So again, we will continue to encourage reporting. However, that Enhanced Surveillance Advisory will sunset when the emergency declaration ends. Another item that will be transitioning will be the Arizona Surge Line. The Surge Line was set up in 2020, and we expect that when the emergency declaration ends, the executive order that mandates the surge line will no longer be in effect. So that service line will be transitioning over to perhaps more of a rural transfer center service. More information to follow on that one. Additionally, on the EMS side, we currently have a couple waivers in play. One is an emergency measure that allows all levels of EMCTs to administer vaccinations and viral testing. When the emergency declaration ends, this emergency measure will also sunset. So we will be sending out additional communication to stakeholders when that does happen to make sure that we are listing out all of the executive orders, waivers, and emergency measures that will be ending. The other thing that I'll put on folks' radar is that there is a bit of legislation that's making its way through right now that would prolong the temporary professional licensing that is in play right now that authorizes some individuals under temporary licenses, such as nurses, to be working in the state of Arizona. There is a bill right now that would allow that temporary licensing to be in place until the end of the calendar year, I believe. So we're tracking that one, and we believe that that one may be successful in order to avoid a waiver cliff that would cut off any of those temporary professional licenses. We will keep the group updated, of course. If you have not already, please subscribe to our Gov Delivery listserv. That is how we will push out primary messaging to stakeholders regarding the impact of the end of the emergency declaration. I think there are a couple more items that we want to highlight here, especially related to crisis standards of care. Dr. Bradley?
Thank you, Chief Garcia. We definitely wanted to make sure, for those of you who are participating in all the committees today, we apologize that you'll hear this a few times, but this is really a significant change in Arizona. Many of you, I'm sure, remember in March of 2020, when crisis standards of care were implemented, there was a huge lift to create COVID-related guidelines and additionally to create educational curriculum to accompany that. The state hosted multiple webinars. Agencies did quite a bit of training. So as we see that, and we also see crisis standards of care, and we want to give people to start developing kind of routine standards, how you educate that to your personnel. So that's one of the out. As Chief Garcia mentioned at the last, free is the method that we can communicate out most readily any information. I'm happy to say, I think when we started COVID, we had about 2,000 people on our listserv, and we are over 7,000 now. So we are definitely moving in a positive direction, but that is the method out. We will also send out information to the regional councils as well, but really want to make sure that everyone is aware that the crisis standards of care will be ending, likely when that declaration ends as well, which will mean some protocols and guidelines for your area may need to be updated as well. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief Garcia and Dr. Bradley, for that. Are there any questions?
Hi, it's Brian.
Brian?
So a number of things that were done in terms of what certain invasive treatments may or may not have been performed. and so on, versus I think some people think of crisis standards of care of how people are dealt with in the more in the hospital. Are those kinds of things that might also be impacted where we made some changes and who gets CPAP, who doesn't get CPAP, intubation, and things like that? Or would those impact any guidelines we put into place for that? Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes, Brian, thank you for clarifying. So we certainly went to some kind of altered standards of care with limiting positive pressure ventilation. There was also statements regarding kind of intubation, limiting that, some changes in medications and SVN. So definitely those are things that will need to be discussed within your region and with your medical direction forward. So yes, very specific to patient care related items.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, thank you again. And with that, we can move on to our last action item, which is to discuss the results of state and regional training and workforce survey. So if I can get a motion to discuss this last action item.
So moved, Brian.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's having a good day. Shelly, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so let me see here. I think it's going to be showing in a second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So let's go into the slide deck. And first off, I want to just thank everyone for their participation, support, and putting this together. Really, we have promoted this through the regional EMS council meetings, through various committee meetings. So really appreciate the agencies and EMCTs who participated. And a big thank you to Julia for putting this together, and Cody for also putting these slides together. So taking the data Julia collected through the survey and putting the slides together. So let's start off saying thank you, and we appreciate all your support with this. So first, we want to talk about the methodology. So the goal of the survey was to gather information on EMS workforce needs and interests in Arizona. The number of EMS agencies who responded to the survey was 94. The number of EMCTs who responded to the survey was 164. So we do have a few limitations that we wanted to highlight: the sample size, the method of distribution, possibly uneven regional representation, and the potential for overlap. So all the survey responses were anonymous, and the results of this assessment will be shared at the state and regional levels only. Respondents were asked to identify whether they were responding on behalf of their EMS agency or as themselves as an EMCT. So if they were completing on behalf of their EMS agency, the department sought for just one survey per agency, preferably from an authorized representative. The department does not have any additional funding identified for EMS workforce initiatives yet, but we're hopeful this survey can kind of spur that, and we can kind of better understand the needs of the regions in the event that we're able to identify funding for future education and training. So here's what the response summary provided to us. So we see the EMS agencies. It's a pretty even distribution, but there are some more, the southern and western and overall Arizona, the distribution. The northern region has 13. There were 7 that were unknown, and 2 that were none or NA didn't provide that information to us. So as we can see in the EMCT level data, we have that distribution as well that is somewhat consistent, but there is kind of a lacking participation from the northern region, which we hope to get more interest in that in the future. So the average years in the field of the EMCTs responded is 14, which is pretty outstanding. It's more than we thought. So the agencies that were experiencing staff shortages was 63 of 94. And the main barriers identified for that were lack of compensation or incentives, lack of recruitment resources, increase in EMS provider illnesses and or injury, lack of resources related to resilience, mental health or wellness, and just a lack of training opportunity. So this is new or ongoing staff shortages, and you'll see slides.
Sorry about that.
My headphones cut out. So let me go ahead and
start here.
So
Can everyone hear me
Can everyone
okay?
hear me okay?
You're echoing, Travis.
Okay, how about now?
Great.
Okay, so as we can see here, ongoing issues, is 44%. Ongoing worse with COVID was about 8%. New is 19%. New with COVID, 21%. Recruitment challenges, 3%. And NA was 4%. And I want to highlight here that on each slide, you'll see that we kind of talk about the data that's being reported by EMS agencies or EMCT level data. So this slide talks about the amount of EMCTs that the agencies needed that submitted information to us through the survey. And we can see here that, the main number is between the 6 to 10 range. 11 to 20 is also pretty alarming. So we see there is a massive shortage that we're hopeful to improve in the future. So this is agency level data, and this is recruitment and retention barriers, and this was select all that apply, which is why you see more than the 94 agencies that submitted the data to us. So pay is obviously number one, and then we go through location, stress, time commitment, no interest, training requirements, and so on. So as you can see, pay is the number one reason. Location is number two. Those ones are kind of much more outweighing the other topics here. So how are agencies addressing staffing issues, suggestions, and best practices? So this is where people could, put information to us that it wasn't an A, B, C, or D question and the field wasn't there. They had to just type some things in. And so these are responses that were by selecting other and just kind of what people felt would be there, what an agency felt would be how to correct the staffing issues, some suggestions and best practices. So we can see here that active recruiting, again, the bonus and incentives, overtime, no money for raises, increased pay. So there are some common themes throughout this. We can see obviously that, pay is a big issue. We can also see that, actively recruiting is a big issue throughout this. And we also can see too that the hiring process, you hiring more personnel, and a possible training opportunity as well, as we'll see throughout these slides as well. So when it comes to the education section, agencies that have dedicated EMS training officer is 67%. Agencies that offer continuing education courses to their EMCTs, 86%. And agencies that provide support, paid leave, paid courses to their EMCTs, seeking continuing education is 77%. So this question was asked to our EMCTs, and this is their responses of 164. So how important was it to go outside of your department to get continuing ed? And we can see here that the large range is going to be that 34%, very important. And we also can see that that 4 range here is also something that's a high response back to us, 21%. So the primary method of training, again, agency level data here, is we see virtual, in-person, and other. And so obviously virtual had the most, in-person was second, and other was 16%. And this is a preferred method of learning. We have our top 3 by the EMS agencies, which would be lectures and classes, case reviews, online/internet training. Top 3s by EMCTs were lectures and classes, case reviews, and a high realistic simulation. So this is additional training area suggestions from both EMCTs and EMS agencies. And what's highlighted in red, as you can see here in this little right corner, was suggested both by agencies and EMCTs. So we know there's a lot of information here, but we felt that this was very valuable to share with the group. And so I'll pause here while everyone kind of reads through this information. Okay, going to the next slide. So EMCTs were asked, what are some additional training area suggestions? And it was, again, check all that apply. So multiple selections can be selected on this question. And we can see here that cardiac was number 1, EKG, trauma, pharmacology, and so on. And I'll pause here again, just so everyone can kind of soak in the information. And don't worry if I went too fast through a few slides, we can also share this after the meeting as well. Okay, so some challenges related to continuing ed and or training. So the top 3, according to EMS agencies, was barriers to continuing education opportunities such as cost, again, cost is a big theme, location, etc. Inability to provide community education such as CPR, AED training due to workforce shortages, lack of available continuing opportunities for existing workforce. And the top 3, according to EMCTs, was time commitment, again, that cost, we see that a lot here, and the distance/travel, which is also a pretty common theme.
Travis, Orlando. Travis?
Yes.
I got a quick question. I don't know if I missed it. Where's this group at where they don't have, is this more in the rural areas, smaller departments that they're having issues with continuing education, or are we all state of Arizona? I just wanted to see what your statistics were.
So I missed the first part of your question. There was an echo on my side, so I disconnected my phone from the call to join just purely through my computer. What was the first part of your question?
Yeah, I wanted to know if what was your audience? Is this in a rural area, or is this smaller departments that cannot afford or do not have any resources for continuing education?
So related to this specific question, I would have to turn to Julia, who put together the survey. And that's a question. We have a last slide where it provides our email contact and a phone number for follow-up questions. I think that'd be a very good question to submit to us. Julie can also answer that now if she knows the answer to that, but I don't want to put her on the spot if we have to look back for that information.
I'll just say that the survey was technically statewide, so agencies or AMCTs from across the state in both rural and urban areas were encouraged to participate. But we can probably look at responses based on whether or not they answered urban or rural areas to see if there is specific information there. But we have not done that currently, but happy to do so.
Hey, this is TJ. I played with some of the raw data a little bit, and I think I can give Orlando a little bit of context. So 31 of the respondents were from fire districts, and that's throughout Arizona, varying sizes. You had 25 that were municipal fire. 53 of them were private EMS, 6 police officers. Depending on the perspective that they use to evaluate the question, I'm guessing probably 15 were hospital-based folks, 11 tribal, EMS and fire, and 7 volunteers. So I think you had a pretty wide spectrum of response from urban areas and rural, and then a wide variety of participation from agencies, if that helps.
Thank you. I'm just trying to pinpoint where the lack of, I'm assuming this is still rural areas and small departments, folks that are not in the larger municipal agencies or private agencies, because they seem to have, seems to have their own training programs and continuing education, the larger ones anyway. So, which makes me wonder if this is mostly rural.
Yeah, and that's a great question. Again, we did collect that data of what region the agency or EMCT was located when they submitted the survey. So we can definitely look at the data and look back to see what were the top 3, depending on their geographic location. That's a very good suggestion. This is basically our first shot at taking the data and putting it into this PowerPoint to share with the group. So we look to further enhance data too. And questions like that are things we highly recommend and suggest, so we can give you the data that you need.
Sure. And I think what TJ was also looking at, or was talking about, National Registry opening up distributed learning, right, TJ? So maybe
yeah,
this is
the CE one, and there's a couple of items I think that are going to be relevant to that discussion coming up, as far as repository of available information online and a central distribution point, which is one of the items we've been working on from the education page of the Bureau's website.
Travis, this is Sandy. I think also this survey has been taken kind of during the COVID. So I think some of that may play into some of this data, because the inability to provide community education, that was a big one, because people were not going out to do any education. And, you know, and I think that potentially could skew it a little bit. It'd be interesting to do a follow-up survey in another year and see if the responses are the same.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. And we're always looking to improve the data that we collect. And you're right. Some of this data could be skewed, probably because of COVID, you know, reasons that we all know. That was a pretty crazy couple of years. And so we're hopeful to have the survey again, you know, enhance our survey on our side to make it better for everyone else. And taking those suggestions into account next time we publish a survey for people to take, so we get more, you know, accurate data and possibly remove that skew from COVID. So that's a great suggestion. And again, we welcome all suggestions, all comments, all feedbacks. If you don't want to share it through this meeting today, you can always contact the individual we'll have at the end. It's going to be Julia. You can contact Julia, and we'll look to implement those or get some data for you that you'd like. So I'll go to the next slide. So this is according to EMCTs. Which of the following make a CE program worthy of your time? And the top 4 responses are bolded, as we can see at the bottom right-hand corner here. So I'll let everyone soak this information in before I continue to the next slide. And so I should state too, just for clarification, that these others listed by EMCTs were things that they can fill in. So it was a check other box and they can type some responses in. And these were ones that were where you could select on the actual survey. So these were responses that were selectable, and we can gather the same information here. These are ones that people just provided to us through the other section.
I think it's interesting, Travis, that they notice that they want a hands-on component, but that they also want it to be virtual.
Yes. That is very interesting to note.
Have we spoken to AIMS at all? I know they have a conference coming up here soon. Just to, I don't know if they're still offering scholarship. I know they're charging folks or doing some scholarship throughout rural areas. You know, these are legitimate stuff that I think is, in my opinion anyway, is a concern when our colleagues, our EMCTs, are having issues with continuing education. And we are putting up all these SDRs and PowerPoints, and they don't know where to go.
So there was a meeting yesterday with AIMS, but unfortunately we didn't have this PowerPoint perfectly hammered down at that point. So we plan to share it with AIMS and have it as an agenda item for future meetings. I will say too, again, credit to Cody as well here and to Julia. We have updated our Bureau's webpage under the education section to provide CE with either, you know, cost-effective, low cost, or free. So there are resources on our webpage that we designed recently, and we sent it out through Gov Delivery, but I know everyone doesn't read emails. So on that webpage, there is a lot of CE opportunities that we try to promote, that we find and we try to promote. And if there's anything that, you know, you feel can benefit our webpage to give EMCTs or anyone in the EMS field the opportunity to get more value from our webpage, please let us know, because we want to make it as easy as possible. And we want to allow, you know, EMCTs to have easy access to resources that are cost effective and free. So again, all suggestions that we come from this survey or anything else from our website, please, you can email me or Julian. We'll have our contact information at the end, but we can also provide, you know, mine and Cody as well.
Thank you, Travis, very much. Gail, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Amber. I think your point is a very key piece to pick up from these some of these answers. You know, people are looking for more virtual training, but when you look at the hands-on component, it's really the skills-based things that people are wanting to do more hands-on. So as, you know, people start looking at how do you put your educational modules out there, how do you provide education, do we start making our focus that a lot of the education could potentially be done virtually with the focus on the hands-on skills base being in person, obviously. And so looking at how you develop and deliver your educational modules can be really focused on some of this input. So I think that feedback and looking at those two things combined speaks to that fact. There's a lot of education that can be done very well with a lot of the learning management systems that are out there compared to older technology. And there's a way to do really high quality distributive education, but to ensure that you're still providing that hands-on skill-based evaluation and training as well. So I think it is interesting when you see those two pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Gail. I think that for a lot of, especially a large, it's very hard to find the EMS training time to get everyone in person all the time. So, you know, we focus a lot on, you know, trying to do some more flipped classroom style of learning where a lot of that distributed part is done up front, and then you can, you know, really condense some of the hands-on components to just what's necessary rather than them being, you know, in a classroom for a whole 40-hour research, which is, it's difficult to find the time to do that. So I completely agree. And Sandy, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I did. I can address the AIMS for Orlando. Orlando, yes, AIMS does do the 2 conferences. We had one in December, and we have another one coming up in June. Both of these currently are virtual. However, next year we are planning on doing it in person. There are scholarships available, and we are currently looking at some funding that has been provided to us through rural health. It's a very limited amount, but it is for the areas that have, the very rural areas that have a specific type of hospital in that region. And we are looking for ways to spend that monies, and it has to be done by August. So it's kind of a tight, very tight framework. So we are looking for input on that. So if anybody has any input on how to use it, it's $4,500. It's not a lot of money, but we certainly can use it on some of these educational programs, which we're happy to do. We just need to know what is needed from those critical access hospital areas. So, but we also have been offering education actually at our functional group every month. We have an educational component that we issue CEs for. So there is some out there. It's just that maybe we're not doing a good enough job of getting the information out as to where these educational opportunities are.
Thank you, Sandy. Any other discussion on this item? Again, thank you to Travis and Julia for putting all of this information together and presenting it today. Moving.
Of course, I think we just have a few more slides. That's okay with you.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So we just have a common theme slide. I think we have just a question slide for this. So here's a common theme slide from EMCTs and agencies. And so again, I'll pause for any questions or discussions and to allow you to select the information. And again, I think there's some common themes here that we're seeing throughout. Okay, I will go to our next slide, and this is the end of the slide deck. So again, thank you to Julia for putting together the survey, and thank you to everyone for promoting the survey and being supportive of us collecting the information. We really appreciate that. And a big thank you to Cody for taking the data that was collected and turning it into a beautiful presentation. So I'll pause there for any questions, comments, or feedback. Again, if you're, if you don't want to answer or don't want to say anything during this meeting, go ahead and send Julie an email or give her a call.
Travis, this is Gail. I just wanted to extend a big thank you to everyone who participated in producing the survey and then also taking the survey. I think there's some really important information that's being gathered here, and just based on the feedback and questions from people on the meeting, it sounds like this has definitely stirred some questions for people. So a big thank you again for all the work that goes into producing this. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, if you're interested in getting this information from us, we can also, share it via email with you as well. So just reach out to us and we'll be happy to share. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Michelle, you still have the agenda up somewhere?
Yeah.
It's coming. Okay. I think we had at least one agenda item from Matt for the next meeting for another work group potentially. If there are any other agenda items that you would like to be considered for the next meeting, you can go ahead and let us know now, or you can always send an email to Shelley or myself. All right. Next item is a call to the public. And if there are none, I'll just go over a couple of upcoming events. The Advanced Hazmat Life Support has a couple of trainings coming up. Provider instructor course that is in Tucson, virtual, as well as the Radiologic Incident Terrorism training and the AIMS 22nd Annual Odyssey Conference as well, coming up in June, as was already mentioned. If there are other trainings available, we'll post them on the Bureau's webpage, so you can find that link there as well. And with that, the next meeting is going to be in July, so towards the end of July. Again, location to be announced hopefully we're still in person. And with that, I can take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved, Brian.
Great. Awesome. All right, we will see you guys all in July. Thank you.
I'll feel good.
Thank you.